Are you all still awake? Oh my goodness, it is so good to be with all of you. You know, I had a big long speech that some people who work for me gave me to read to you all tonight and to talk to you about, and I just decided to come up here and just talk. Is that okay? Just share my heart with all of you. Now, I've been looking forward to coming here for a long time. I love Jeff Duncan with all my heart. That man loves you and works for you each and every day. But frankly, right now I'm a little bit mad at him. I'm upset because this is the first time he's ever invited me to this event before. This is the very first time I got an invitation that said, please, Kristi, would you come to my Faith and Freedom barbecue? And I said, absolutely, I'll be there. Glad you found my name on your list. You know, and my mom was asking me if she could come with me. She said, oh, I've always wanted to go to South Carolina. It's such a beautiful state. I've never been there. Can I go with you, Kristi? And I said, absolutely, Mom. I think that'd be a fantastic trip for you to go on with me. And then I was talking to a gentleman that I met one day in South Dakota who grew up here in South Carolina, and I told him that I was coming, and he said to me, oh my goodness, make sure you have the barbecue. It is so good, it'll make you want to slap your mama. So I left my mom home. I didn't want to take a chance. I didn't want to get here and, you know, have something happen that I'd have to account for the next day. So she's very disappointed. I'll have to bring her back someday. But there's something about being in front of a whole bunch of people that love the Lord that I feel like I have a confession that I have to make. I literally think I maybe ate a wheelbarrow full of your barbecue back there. So they almost had to roll me out here on the stage. It was so good. So it's fantastic. And I have a feeling everybody here in this room that you and Jesus are buds, right? Right? You're real close with the Lord, and that you've got a faith in Him that will be your foundation far into the future. Listen, I was thinking this morning as I was watching the news and watching politicians dance all over the place, can't make up their mind where they stand, what they want to say, what's popular today. Did we poll so I know what my next speech should be? And I was reminded of my favorite book in the Bible, which is James. And in the book of James, there's a scripture verse that says, a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. And that is our problem in this country, is that people are double-minded and trying to play both sides and don't know where their faith and their foundation comes from. And we're seeing the consequences of that play out not just across our communities and our states, but across this country and now across the world. Afghanistan is a shame and never should have happened. It never should have happened. And what shocks me, and I'm going to ask you all to do a favor for me, is that I am getting dozens and dozens and dozens of texts and phone calls and having conversations with veterans who served in our military over the years but went to Afghanistan as well, and they're telling me, Kristi, I just don't know if it was worth it. I don't know if I should have. I don't know if the sacrifice was worth it, and they are doubting themselves, and it breaks my heart. If you see a veteran that served in our military, you tell them absolutely it was worth it. Every single moment sacrifice was because of this great country. For those who served in Afghanistan, we lived in peace here on our streets because they were over there dealing with the terror. And that those women and children and girls in Afghanistan now know that there is a different way of life than what they had to experience for generations. They know there is a choice and a hope and a future because we were there, and we will continue to pray and to be by our allies' sides and get our Americans out of there, regardless of what this White House does or what it fails at doing next. That their service is worth it, it's still worth it, and we need them to continue to step up. Make sure you remind them of that and how grateful we are. Ronald Reagan gave a quote, and I used to say it all the time, and I realized the other day I haven't said it for a very long time, but it was a quote that said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." That it must be, we didn't pass it on to our children in our bloodstream, that it must be fought for, protected, and passed on to them in order for them to do the same. And we need to remember that freedom doesn't just show up every day and stay here because we want it to. We have to fight for it and protect it each and every day. And Ronald Reagan said those very wise words, and we need to remember that. It's never more than one generation away from extinction. And you and I, all of us, have a responsibility to show up and to make sure that we're fighting for it, we're protecting it. Because it doesn't go in our bloodstream, we have to do the work to make sure that it's ensured in this country long into the future. Commit to me that you will do that. Commit to me that you will be freedom fighters. Well, now let's just have an honest conversation here tonight, okay? You be honest with me. None of you people had any idea who I was a year and a half ago, did you? Come on. God can see you. The only reason that you know who I am today is because the liberals were busy kicking me in the head every single day for the decisions that I was making in South Dakota, right? They called me reckless, that I was irresponsible. Elizabeth Warren, Rachel Maddow, night after night on the national news, telling people that I was dangerous for the decisions that I was making for my people. And listen, my people are happy. And they're happy because they're free. They're happy because they're free of what we've done. And there's very few people that I've met in my public experience that love and understand the importance of relationships and each other and fight for their people like your governor. You guys are incredibly blessed to have Henry as your governor. He talks about you all the time. He doesn't sit in his office and make decisions an arm's length away and consult with his closest advisors before he makes decisions. He thinks of you in your home, how you work hard to put a roof over your heads, and what he can do to make sure he can protect that and give you opportunities in the future. So whatever you do, Henry has had your back. You need to have his. You need to defend him in every conversation, everywhere you go, because you have a governor that deeply loves you in this state. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my story, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I've made some of my decisions, but I think in order for you to understand how I've made my decisions, would it be okay if I share a little bit with you about my family and growing up? Is that all right? Okay, fantastic. Well, from the time I was a little girl, I would say only 5 or 6 years old, all I ever wanted to do was to grow up and to ranch with my dad. My dad was a cowboy, and he was really, really tough. We worked all the time. In fact, the way that he woke us kids up every single morning was by yelling up the stairs to where all of our bedrooms were. He would holler up the stairs as loud as he could, "Get up! More people die in bed than anywhere else." And I don't even know if that's true. But we'd get up and we'd work together every day, and we sun up till sundown, and that was, our family was the most important thing besides being in church every time the doors were open. And he taught us incredibly valuable lessons. One of the things I appreciate the most about how my parents raised me was the fact that they raised us to do impossible things. I remember my dad giving me jobs all the time that I just thought, there's no way that I can ever do that. There was one time we were out, he told me and my younger brother, I think my brother was 8, I was probably about 11, 12 years old, and he told us to go put a mother cow in the chute to make her calf suck. Did you guys know that when cows calve, that sometimes they get a fever and they don't like their babies? They won't let them eat. Well, he was sending us, it had rained that day, over to put this cow. He was working in the shop away on some machinery and said, go put that cow in and make that calf suck. So we went over there, and as soon as we crawled in that corral, that cow took straight after us and put us right back up over the fence. And we looked at each other and thought, how are we going to do this? She literally wants to rub us in the dirt. But we knew that going back and telling Dad we couldn't get it done wasn't an option, so we climbed back over the fence and we tried it again, and she chased us right back. In fact, she hit Rob on his rear end and lifted him right up over the fence. So we got all kinds of strategy and figured out ways to get her to chase him. I opened the barn door, figured out ways to distract her. We couldn't do it. Finally, we went over to the shop and said to Dad, we're sorry, we just can't get her in. She's too mean. He said, I told you to get that cow in the chute and you make that calf suck, and don't come back here until it's done. So we turned around and we headed back over to the barn and tried again and just couldn't. And we just knew that we had to go back in failure and tell him we didn't get it done. We went over to the shop and we walked up to him after several hours of trying to do this and shrugged our shoulders in defeat and said we can't do it, and he didn't say a word. He stomped across the shop. He pulled on his rubber overboots over his cowboy boots. You guys remember those overshoes? Because it was muddy out. He didn't even take the time to buckle them, and he took off across the yard, and we were running to keep up behind him, scared that he was so angry at us because he didn't say a word. He climbed over the fence of the corral, started walking across the corral, and that cow came straight for him. And he threw his arm around her neck, put her in a headlock, and started punching her in the nose and saying, now you go get in that chute. And they're going around and around the corral, and we're sitting on top of the corral fence thinking, does our dad really have that cow in a headlock? And he's punching her, trying to get her in the barn, and all of a sudden he goes down and she kneels down with her front legs on his chest and just starts to rub him in the dirt. And we thought, Dad's a goner. We jump off over the corral fence, we run out there, we get her off of him and get him up, and he dusts himself off, and he walks over to us at the fence, and he says, well, I had her right where I wanted her until I tripped on my overshoes. And we said, yeah, you did, yeah. But he also gave us big jobs that we did accomplish. He never taught me to drive a semi. I was 12 years old and he got it going down the road and he jumped out the door and said, take it home, make your corners wide. And I made it home, but I never shifted gears, didn't know how to stop, so I just shut it off. But I remember when I shut it off, and I had cried most of the way home, when I shut it off, I thought to myself, I made it. And I thought, my next thought was, I can probably drive anything. And one of the things that I've realized over the years is that we are crippling our children in this country. And we are crippling them by doing everything for them. It is not our job as parents and grandparents to do everything for our kids. It is our job to prepare them for life. And that when we give them impossible things to do, we are making them to be problem solvers. And when they do solve a problem, we give them the confidence to go forward and to solve even bigger challenges and take them on and to stand up when it's important. So I'm going to ask all of you today, you have kids in your life, you have young people in your life, stop doing things for them. Stop making life easy. That is not what you are called to do. Your job is to prepare them for life and the challenges ahead and give them impossible things to do. That's my little side sermon tonight. Sorry, my talking about my mom and dad always get me going about that, but I think that's the best gift they ever gave me. Well, I grew up, I went to college and was planning on graduating from college, coming home and taking over the operation with my dad. And when my dad was 49 years old and I was still in school, he was killed in an accident on our farm. At the time, he was 49 years old. And it was absolutely devastating for our family. At the time, my older sister was living in Georgia. My older brother was in Oklahoma. My younger brother was still in high school. So I ended up quitting college and coming home and taking over as general manager of all the businesses. You know, at the time, we were farming 10,000 acres. The day he died, he had rented another 2,500 acres. We had a large cow-calf operation, feedlots. We were backgrounding our calves and several other businesses. It was a lot. But I'll never forget the overwhelming feeling that I felt months after Dad passed away when I got a letter in the mail from the IRS that said we owed death taxes. That because we had a tragedy in our family, for some reason now I had a huge bill that I owed the federal government. And like a lot of small business owners, ranchers, farmers, we had land, machinery, and cattle, but that didn't mean we had any money in the bank. So people ask why I got involved in government and politics. It was because of that. It was because it made me angry. It took me 10 years to pay off those taxes. I ended up starting a hunting lodge to make more money off of our land to try to pay them off. My mom bought a restaurant because she thought it would be fun. I don't know if any of you have ever owned a restaurant, but they're a lot of work. So I ended up managing that for her as well. But we paid off those taxes, but I also started to show up, started to go to meetings, got passionate about tax reform. Ended up running for our state legislature, served there for 4 years in leadership, and then in 2010 ran for Congress. Listen, I enjoyed my time in Congress. It was great to work on policy. I had the great honor of working with President Trump to do tax reform. People ask me all the time why I love President Trump. He is the only politician that I've ever worked with in my life that actually did every single thing that he said he was going to do. He followed through on every single thing that he said he was going to do. I went to 17 different states campaigning for him in this last election because I knew Biden would be bad, but I don't think anybody could have predicted how bad he really is and how quickly he's destroying this country. I want you to tell you how proud I was of Henry, that when President Trump first came on the scene, he was the first statewide elected official that endorsed President Trump to be President of the United States. He knows how to pick winners. He knows how to pick winners. But when I was in Congress, I had the chance to work on National Defense Authorization Act. I served on the Armed Services Committee, had the chance to be on Ways and Means and do big policies on trade agreements, tax reform, those types of things, healthcare reform. But I got to looking at the fact that in Congress you can work on policy, you can do bills, but governors are CEOs. Governors get the chance every single day to wake up and to set an agenda, to make decisions that impact families and businesses. So I decided that I was going to run for governor in 2018 and got elected in a very tight race in the state of South Dakota. Most people think South Dakota is very conservative. We elect Republicans, but we've also elected a lot of Democrats as well. When I ran for Congress, I replaced a Democrat. We still had a U.S. Senator who's a Democrat. We're the home of U.S. Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle, if you remember him. George McGovern came from South Dakota. It's a very populous state. Had a tough race for governor, and I ran on the campaign, I ran on the promise that I wanted to build strong families. That a lot of the problems that we see in this country comes from the breakdown of the family. Parents not being parents. I don't really care what your family looks like. I just want you to be a family, be together, sit around a dinner table, take care of each other, go to church. That's what we need in this country to fix a lot of the issues that we're having. I also talked consistently about the fact that I wanted South Dakota to be an example to the nation. That I believed we were small, we didn't have a lot of people, but that also meant we could do things that other states couldn't do. We could implement conservative reforms and put them into place and show that they really do work. We could be a pilot project for the rest of the country, that they could follow our example. I had no idea that we would become an example to the nation because of a pandemic. That is what would happen, but it did. Listen, I think I did what every other governor in this country did when we first started to learn about this virus. We all studied the science, we talked to our healthcare officials, we watched as the virus moved in other countries when it came to the United States, how it hit other states, learned more and more. I think there was just a handful of us, though, that really looked at and talked to our legal general counsel. I spent a lot of time with constitutional attorneys because I believe that when leaders overstep their authority, that's when we break this country. And I didn't want to be the leader that did that. I didn't want to be the leader. So I had taken an oath to the U.S. Constitution. I had taken an oath to the state constitution of the great state of South Dakota, where the motto is, under God, the people rule. And I kept that at the forefront of every single decision that I made. So in South Dakota, we never once closed a single business at all. Never once issued a shelter in place anywhere. In fact, I didn't even define what an essential business was in our state because I didn't believe I had the authority to tell people that their business wasn't essential. I didn't mandate anything such as masks. What I told my people, I stood up in front of them every single day and I said, listen, I'm going to let you use personal responsibility to take care of your family's health, and I'm going to trust you. I'm going to give you all the information that I have, all the tools that I have and resources. We're going to support you, make sure that we focus on hospital capacity, because we can't stop this virus. The science tells us we can't stop it. We can slow it down, but what we need to do as a state is not talk about cases. We need to talk about hospital capacity and make sure that we always have the ability to take care of people should they get very sick from the virus. So that was our focus. And I told them I was going to let them have flexibility so they could keep their businesses open and keep paying their bills and keep food on the table. And people overwhelmingly came together and worked together. And South Dakota got through it better than most any other state in this country. Now, today, this is where we're at in our state, is that we are the state that has lost the least amount of businesses because of the pandemic. We have employees who lost the least amount of hours throughout the last 2 years. We have the least amount of wages lost by anybody who was working during the pandemic. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. In fact, in South Dakota today, I have less than 2,000 people in my entire state that are on unemployment benefits. When President Trump offered the elevated unemployment benefits, I said, thank you, Mr. President, for that flexibility, but we don't need it because the people of South Dakota want to work. And they did, and we turned down those elevated unemployment benefits. Today, we have the fastest growing state in the country. Now, frankly, South Dakota was kind of treading water before I became governor. People were leaving, businesses were leaving, our kids were taking better jobs in other states. Right now, today, South Dakota has the highest GDP in this country. Texas is number 2, which I like saying quite often. Their GDP rate is 7.5%. South Dakota's is at 9.9% today. We have thousands and thousands of people that are moving to South Dakota. You know what? And they're not moving to our state for the weather. They're not moving for our beautiful beaches. They're moving to our state because they want to be like us. That they want to live somewhere where the government respects them. In fact, when all the protests and the riots started across the country last August and September, it made me so mad that I told my staff, I said, listen, we're going to do a marketing campaign to every law enforcement officer in this country. And we did a marketing campaign to them for 1 week that said, if you are a law enforcement officer anywhere in the country and you want to live somewhere where people appreciate you and respect you and will wrap their arms around your family and take care of you, then move to South Dakota. We want you to come and be a part of our way of life. And in 1 week, 900 law enforcement officers from 41 states raised their hands and said, I want to come and live in South Dakota. And got their families. What we clearly saw in 2020 was that leadership has consequences. That from state to state, wherever you look, you could see the decisions that were made by those in leadership and how it either created opportunity and partnership with people and families, or it destroyed families and businesses and the education of children. That leadership had consequences. What shocked me the most was how the media used fear to control people, and how the left used fear to promote their agenda. And they're still doing it today. They have no problem creating fear in individuals to cause them to be unstable and to doubt everything and to question anything and to control them and to perpetuate what they want to see accomplished. Listen, I have 3 kiddos with my husband, Brian, who told me to tell you all hello. He's sorry he couldn't come, but we do still have a family business he's running. 2 girls, Cassidy, who's married to Kyle, and then Kennedy, and then Booker, who's 19 and just decided to go to the mission field. Is going to go out and be a missionary. Which is interesting, because we are all needed in the mission field. Wherever you live is a mission field today, and you have people that you need to be saving and talking to, sharing the truth with. But I am a brand new grandmother. I've got a 2-month-old little baby granddaughter whose name is Adeline West Peters, and she is the most precious thing I've ever seen in my entire life. In fact, grandparents used to make me, kind of angry. You guys used to brag about how wonderful it is, how much better it is being grandparents and parents, and I used to think, oh, whatever. But it is true. It is so much better. I'm only 2 months in, and little Miss Addie has changed my life. I want her to have the chance to grow up in the America that I had the chance to grow up in. I want her to get the same experience that my kids got to grow up in. An America where you stood for the national anthem, and we prayed in schools, where girls were girls, and boys were boys. She deserves that. They deserve that. People ask me all the time why I do what I do. One of a high school student asked me the other day, being a grandma now, does that make you want to be more involved in government and politics or less? Stay home and be with her more. And it's hard because all I want to do is hold that baby girl. But I also recognize, is it really fair for me to sit home and not do all that I can do to help fix whatever I can, whoever I can talk to? It's not. My husband says to me all the time, he said, you always pick the hardest thing to do. You can have 4 choices in front of you and you always pick the hardest one. And I said, but I'm always right. I'm always right. But listen, what we're going through is not nearly as hard as what our founders went through to give us this country. We don't even know what hard is compared to what they had to do and to go through. And we need to keep that perspective. If you keep watching the news and reading Twitter, you're going to lose perspective. And that's the worst thing that can happen to you in this day and age, is that you need to keep the perspective on the fact that you can make a difference every single day with where you are. So I need you to keep working to make sure that you're fighting for conservative principles, that you're defending life, every single life. I was the first governor in the country that when I was elected decided that I was going to put a full-time staffer in my governor's office with the title of being a pro-life advocate. That person every day, that member of my general counsel team, all they do is look for opportunities to protect life. Where can we bring another piece of legislation that will protect life? Where can we fight a court case that will make sure that we're protecting our unborn and making sure that we're being and leading the country and making sure that we're standing for life each and every day? We're also the #1 state in the country for veterans and for where they can find and be appreciated and live a life of value and knowing they continue to give value. And we can all lead by example. And I think that we've been given incredible challenges during this point of time of history, which brings us to a point of huge opportunity. So before I leave you tonight, I want to ask you to do 3 things for me. I can come and talk to you and share my stories and tell you about how implementing conservative policies created opportunity and growth for my state, that we're seeing historic revenues, put more money into trust funds, reserves, and long-term infrastructure than we ever have in the history of South Dakota. And that the people are doing so well that we have cut our mental health challenges. We're one of the only 2 states in the country that lowered our drug overdoses, that people are happy because they've been given the opportunity to be free. But these 3 things I want to ask you to do. Number 1, I want you to start saying yes. When Cassidy, my oldest daughter, was first born, they had a baby shower for me at someone's home. And they invited us all to come over there, and when they went around the room, they asked all the people there, all the women, to give advice to me as a new mom. What advice would you give to Kristi as a new mom when this baby comes? Which, by the way, I went to a baby shower the other day, and there was men there. And frankly, it ruined the whole experience. So, if you men get invited to a baby shower, stay home. I don't know whose idea that was. It was, yeah, this one man over here greatly approves of that message. It was the strangest experience. Anyways, they went around and gave advice. They got to my grandmother, who is a German tough woman who worked day and night. They got to Grandma, and what she said to me is, Kristi, listen, say yes as much as you possibly can, because so many times as a mom, you have to say no. And that really struck me, that I wanted to be a mom who said yes. I didn't want to be a mom who said no all the time. So if my kids, growing up throughout the years, if they wanted to race down the driveway, we raced down the driveway, which was about a half a mile long. So it was a heck of a sprint. If they wanted to jump in a mud puddle on Easter Sunday, we jumped in a mud puddle. I wanted to be a mom that said yes, but I also applied that to the rest of my life. I decided that when people asked me to do something, that I would say yes, and that I would do it. Didn't mean I was committing to it forever. It just meant that I was going to be someone who said yes and try it. And I'm going to ask all of you to start saying yes. Listen, the world will tell you that you're too busy. You need to say no more, that you need more me time, more mental health days. Give me a break. Start saying yes to helping, to stepping up. You may find you have a gift and a talent that you didn't know that you had. You might meet someone at that meeting that you went to, or that committee that you joined, or that candidate that you're helping. You might meet somebody that changes your life forever. It may be your next business partner. It might be the person who becomes your mentor. So instead of saying no, start saying yes and show up. Show up and support people who are fighting for this country. Go to that meeting where your voice needs to be heard. Say yes. The second thing is that this country is addicted to being offended. Isn't it? Don't we just love to be offended by each other all the time? I need you to get over yourself. Okay? Just get over yourselves. Listen, there are people that we have quit talking to. We've all got people in our lives that we think are so far gone that we'll never convince them that we're right on policies or viewpoints on the government or what's going on in this country. You need to go talk to those people again. Those individuals are in our families, they're in our communities, they're in our churches. And you need to get over yourself and start talking to them again. And take the anger and the emotion out of the discussion. And just listen. Nobody in this country feels like they're being listened to anymore. When I married into my husband's family, the vast majority of them were Democrats. Now almost all of them are Republicans. And my mother-in-law is like a Tea Party crazy woman now. I tell her all the time, Sharon, you better watch yourself. You sound like you're a Tea Partier. But that didn't happen because I yelled at her every day. And because I bullied them and wouldn't listen and insisted on my opinion being heard around the Thanksgiving Day table. It happened because I focused on our relationship and listening and then giving them counterpoints that were reasonable and logical. So I need you to start talking to people that you've written off and people that you think are hopeless, because that's what we really need to turn this country around. The last thing I'm going to ask you to do is that I need you to be happy. Okay? Be optimistic. We will draw people to us by our optimism, because we're the only ones who have the hope. We're the only ones who embrace policies and principles that actually create opportunity and success and happiness. We woke up this morning in the United States of America. We woke up better off than 99% of the people in this world just because of the great country that we're in today. So we need to be happy and remember that and turn off the news. Focus on people and loving them and then sharing really what your heart is. And those doors will be open and they'll be attracted to you because they'll want to be like you and with you. I want to share one last story and I'm done, I promise. I know I talked way too long. I just like you too much. That's my problem. I feel like it's a family discussion. I'll never forget when I first got to Washington, D.C. and had been there working for about a year when I had to go listen to a State of the Union address by President Obama. Yeah, here, tell me about it. And I didn't want to go. I'll be honest, I had a really bad attitude about it. Those things are kind of stand up, sit down, clap, don't clap, look angry, cameras are on you, just all kind of a show, and I didn't want to go. But I knew I had to, so I went to the House floor, I got there, waited for President Obama to start speaking, and he started to speak, and I was only getting angrier. He was saying things that I felt like were not true, and that were not what really was happening, what we had done, what he was really doing through policy in his agencies and departments, and I was getting furious. And as I was sitting there, I got up and I went to the back of the House floor because I couldn't sit there and take it anymore, and I started to pace. And then I started to pray. And I remember distinctly that I was praying that God would confuse his speech. That he would distract him by something and forget his words. That his papers would suddenly disappear, and that whatever message he was trying to get to the American people would not get through. When suddenly I just felt like I hit a brick wall, and I realized that I was being disobedient. I was doing the exact opposite of what God had called me to do. That God had told me and us to pray for our leaders. And here I was on the floor of the United States House praying against our leaders. And I just felt so convicted. And I remembered that all of a sudden I started to pray for him. And it reminded me of the fact that in an instant, as hopeless as everything looks, and as terrible as the world stage looks, and the leadership in the White House, and we think it will take us years to get this country back on its foundation, that God can change one man's heart like that and change everything, right? Yeah. And our faith is what tells us that it's not hopeless, that God is still on the throne, and that we still have a belief in him that every single day he changes hearts and minds of people and brings them back to him, and that for us all we need to do is to be obedient and to go forward and stand for truth, fight when necessary. Absolutely we fight for truth. But we also focus on the fact that we are not double-minded. We are of sound mind, and we ask the Lord for wisdom in every decision that we make, and then we take action. So continue through all the chaos that you see in this country, and adhering to the Constitution and the foundation of the United States. Continue to pray, and remember that the Lord has his hand on this nation. It was a great gift to all of us, and he continues to hold each and every one of us in the palm of his hand. And he's got this. You just do your part. You do your part, and you continue to remember how very special your state is, your governor, your congressman, that God gave you the very best in Jeff Duncan. And just remember how blessed you are to live here in the greatest country in the world, the United States of America. May God bless you. You have a wonderful evening. Thank you.